Welcome back to the classroom. Last month we sent you home to do month 1, 2, and 4. This month we're going to be talking about 3 and 5. And guess what? If you didn't finish 1, 2, and 4, you're okay. Because we're not going to be meeting next month. I want everybody to have a nice August, do something fun. And we'll be coming back in September. Now we actually won't be doing anything with these blocks until we come back for our October class, maybe even November when we actually start setting these together. So I want you to take your time and do this accurately. This lesson today is talking about accurate seam allowance and pressing. We're going to review here just a second the 4 patch that ends up in the 4 corners. In Annie's day, she had to cut hundreds of 2-inch squares and sew them together to equal these 4 patches. What we do today is we take, instead of a 2-inch square, we take 2 2-inch strips, sew them together, press them to the dark side, 2 other 2-inch strips, sew them together, press them to the dark side, and then turn this and cut it into a 2-inch piece here and a 2-inch piece there. And with opposite sides together, we now bring this back. And you stay right here. I'm going to do a little sewing and be right back with you. I want to show you something in the seams. Okay, these are called opposing seams. I've got a seam allowance going in one direction and a seam allowance going in the other direction. When you do that, and you might want to stick a little pin in there just for some security, they will nestle right into place. The other thing with appropriate seaming, and I see this time and time again, is you girls don't pin enough. What I want you to do is pin at the beginning and make a match, pin at the end and make a match, and now sew your seam. And I'll be right back. Okay, you can turn it if you want. Now I am using a scant 1/4 of an inch seam allowance on my 12,000. And we talked about seam allowance last month, and that was one of the things I sent you home also to be concerned about, is getting that accurate seam allowance, because that is the thing that helps to give you accurate blocks. I have 1/4 inch tape, and I sent you home with a piece of that. If you put a piece of 1/4 inch tape down what you think is a 1/4 of an inch, and you lay it on where you stitched, you should be able to see, there's my 1/4 inch. It'll sit right next to the seam line. That's about as good a 1/4 inch as you're going to get. Okay, one other thing, and we'll talk a little bit now about pressing. When you open the 4 patch and see how great it matches right there in the center, if you take, and you don't have to, I found some videos that actually cut into this fabric. No, we don't want to do that. That weakens your seam. But what we want to do is create something that looks like this, where we have a tiny little 4 patch in the middle, and it has distributed, again, all the bulk within that square. And all I have to do is push in one direction and push in the other, and see how that kind of went right together. Now come down to my ironing board, sir, and we're going to press. I am using a hot, dry iron. I have no water in here because we're supposed to be pressing and not ironing. There's pushing and then there's setting. If you have water in your iron, you can distort cotton big time. That's why I use only a dry iron. Later on, when you want to make a nice pressed block, I come back and put a little bit of sizing on there. So what you have here is an exact 3.5 inch. Now we're going to create the center portion of block 3. And what I've done here is draw a diagonal line. We are using Nancy's instructions for this. And I'll be back with you in a second and show you what I've seamed. I'm going to use my 1/4 of an inch, and I'm going to be running the black lip of my 1/4 inch foot right on the pencil line that I drew according to your instructions. And then I'm going to turn it and go down the other side. Make sure that when you start sewing each time that your needle is hitting 2 layers of fabric, because you're going on a diagonal here with the fabric, and if you don't have enough fabric to start off, sometimes because of our advanced opening, you will actually stuff the fabric down inside there. Okay, so what you can see here is I have stitched on both sides, okay, and a quarter, that's my scant 1/4 inch. Now I'm going to take my rotary cutter and right on that center pencil line, go right down through there. Again, this is all on your instructions. Okay, here's a little pressing tip. One of Eleanor Burns' ladies, her name was Mackie, she taught us to do what's called setting a seam. At first, I actually set it closed, and then I come back, and again, I'm pressing it. Make sure here at these corners that you do not have any tucks. You're pressing that nice and open. Again, just with a dry iron, you cannot distort the cotton. I'm going to take the next one, do the same thing. I'm setting it, taking the point of my little iron, and again, in these corners, make sure that everything is open. No tucks, no tucks. Okay, at this point, we have these little fellas called dog ears, and you can actually take those off if you want. I don't like to cut off dog ears, but that's what these have become known for. And then you're going to want to refer back to the instructions on the back, because what they want you to do is to take one block and put it in this direction to the other block. And what happens is they're they're slightly larger than 3.5 at this point. And now we're going to sew them in the other direction. And that's this little picture right here. So we're going to draw a line from point to point. Make sure that you're using a nice sharp pencil for this, and make sure that you're actually hitting the point. Sometimes you just have to come back a little bit of lead's worth from the point. And again, I really like it when you stick a pin to make this match and this match. Cotton is our friend, and so we can do some easing wherever necessary. The other thing is, and my next video is going to be on grain. I'm going to teach you something about helping yourself with the grain of your cotton so that it stretches in one direction but doesn't stretch in a direction that you don't want it to. Take your pins out before you get to them. Save that needle. Absolutely no reason for back stitching on this. What I have done is I've put remember last month we put our stitch length exceptionally short down to 1.8, which is about 15 stitches to the inch. I booted it back up again this time to about 2.1, which is about 12 stitches to the inch. Now everything I just did is on the picture that's on the back of Nancy's instructions, so that's cool. All right, so now you see, you have it, or whether you can see that, how I've stitched it on there. Again, I'm going to go through the pencil line. Each time here, you're cutting right on your pencil line. And we have the same kind of thing that happens with this oval. Look at that beautiful match right there in the center. Same thing kind of happens. Watch me do this. It kind of pushes itself open. If it doesn't, what you are actually doing is opening about 2 stitches in the seam allowance, but you are not clipping your thread. That's a no-no. That weakens a seam. Okay, so then I'm ready to press again. Now what we did cast to the wind here was always pressing to the dark. Try to press to the dark when you can, but sometimes in order to make these lay absolutely flat and to have them distributed nicely, you actually have to press away from where you thought you wanted to. But again, no tucks. Open that seam out nice and flat. And when you're done and you stitch those two, you will get a nice block like this, and I went ahead and clipped off my dog ears. And those fellas should come up here and match into that 4 patch, so you know that you have a perfect 3.5 inch. And you also have a 3.5 inch square up ruler that you can lay down on this as well. So we've gone over a decent scant 1/4 inch seam allowance, slightly smaller stitch length, and lots of good flat pressing with a hot dry iron. See you again for the next one, which will be on fabric grain. Thank you.